afternoon, Vice President and Chair today, as well as other committee members and council members present. I'm Christopher Gators, Assistant Chief, Minneapolis Police Department, and I've been asked to present to you a presentation for the legislative directive that was sent out with a request on separation ordinance for the MPD and implementation and operations. So today I'll quickly cover from a high level, and if there are questions, please feel free to ask. The agenda on this presentation is a review of the legislative directive, training overview, educational materials, operational safeguards, policy violations and disciplinary process, communication and consequences, barriers and compliance, upcoming changes and fiscal impact, and community engagement. This slide is merely the legislative directive and the requests within. And as far as the training overview, our academy currently provides explicit training when it comes to the city's separation ordinance and our own MPD policy, which is policy number 49401, 9-401. This includes discussion and permissible and prohibited actions regarding immigration and enforcement, and the narrow legal exceptions that are under the policy as well. It also deals with the U visa, which many people are familiar with. Here on the slide you see U and T, visa education. The T is for trafficking. Recruits and officers receive education from the MPD and regarding this certification process and how it goes about and why it's presented. So they're knowledgeable in that process, and reinforcing the department's commitment to supporting immigrant crime victims and witnesses to crimes involving those individuals. Specialized engagement takes place as well with community functions. The engagements are additional training as far as our Latino community. We have brought back, the chief brought back the community academies to educate individuals on how the interactions with police officers may take place, laws within our state, ordinances within our city. And we have reached out to many different communities, and since we've done that, have received many requests from all communities within Minneapolis wanting their own individual academies for their specific and respected community. In the big picture, when you look at it, you say, why? Why can't we just do it kind of a one-stop shop? There are many requests that specifically are concerns and challenges within specific communities, and they wanted to have their own academies, and Chief O'Hara has accommodated them with that. As far as the educational materials, our officers get updated immigration enforcement policies. They did receive a recent update back in February of this year, which clearly lets them know that the MPD prohibits officers from engaging in asking one's immigration status or enforcement activities. Materials are also distributed in the academy during our roll calls. Roll calls are when the officers come in to work a shift and their supervisor addresses any concerns, challenges, updates, and information that is given to them as well, if there are updates in policy or changes, or if there's just merely reiteration of a policy or concerns that administration or the chief may have, making sure communication is met. As far as community-facing communications, that includes media releases, which have been done externally. Internally, the chief himself has put out communications to the officers, reminding them of what our policies are, and reinforcing the MPD's stance to educate and make certain that our policies are known internally as well as externally to the community as well, and what their police department is doing as far as immigration affairs. and law enforcement. So our officers are also prohibited, as many of you know, from initiating stops, detentions, arrests, solely based on one's immigration status. That includes warrants with ICE and civil immigration status requests that are based on enforcement. That is against our separation ordinance in the city and as well as our internal MPD policy. Officers must document and articulate exceptions based on their actions. So there are some exceptions. A lot of times it will be something relating to maybe trafficking, human trafficking, which is unfortunately in our city as well throughout the United States, and smuggling cases where immigration status may be relevant. The MPD dispatch and supervisors and our supervisory personnel are also trained to recognize and avoid potential violations of the separation ordinance during our field operations. As far as policy violations and disciplinary process, while the MPD is working on our matrix, as many of you know, that's a cumbersome task that we've been going back and forth on and making sure the verbiage is right. With regards to the separation ordinance, that will be a part of our discipline matrix, and that's something, once it comes to fruition, has to be approved by ALIFA, as well as our attorney's office will have to review that. And when that is done, that's when we're anticipating getting that out once that has been completed. As far as the absence of the explicit matrix, in the interim, before this is completed, these officers are still going to be held to the separation ordinance within the city, along with our internal policy, and any discipline that comes from that will be progressive in nature. It can be anything from a letter of reprimand, depending on the totality of the circumstances, all the way through termination, once that is reviewed. Communication of consequences. Officers are informed during training and supervisory briefings that violation of the immigration policy may result in disciplinary action, including termination, as mentioned. The importance of strict compliance and communication through ongoing internal messaging, as the chief has done, and community engagement as we continue and will continue to do in the future, making certain that our citizenry are well up to date with our policies, policy changes, and going out to meet them in their space and not waiting for them to merely just read something online or hear about it by word of mouth. Some barriers that we have noticed is some ambiguity. While the policy requires documentation of any exceptions, it does not yet specify the responsible party for initiating the documentation. That's something that we will continue to be working on for clarification. Training gaps as well, undocumented status alone, making certain our officers understand that that in and of itself is not reasonable suspicion to engage with an individual, nor is it probable cause to engage with the individual for a criminal investigation. Externally, misunderstandings. A lot of times we're asked about other agencies. We ourselves, Chief O'Hara, he's the chief of the Minneapolis Police Department. He does not have the authority to oversee other departments throughout the metro or throughout the state. They do have their own policies and procedures. However, we are governed by our own, and that's something I think many of you are well aware of and is mentioned in this presentation of how we conduct ourselves with immigrant and refugee engagement. Upcoming changes and physical impacts. Once again, clarifying that our policy further updates the discipline matrix that we will be doing and continuing to do, along with the city attorney's office with their guidance. We're also looking at the technology piece. You know, a lot of those data that are available in our record management system, we have to have the ability to pull out those data that are significant so we can actually look and and look at the information within those data and analyze the information to make certain that we're remaining compliant. So we're looking at and making certain that we have the ability, and if we don't, looking at programs that may assist us with doing that, and that continues. The MPD continues its proactive engagement efforts with immigrant and refugee communities. Our leadership, along with our officers on the department, continue to work with community members. We also are not only looking externally, we're looking internally through our own ecosystem with the Department of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs with Director Michelle Rivero, by going and attending the bi-weekly meetings when we are able to, and engaging in dialogue on how best to serve our communities, or our immigrants and refugees in our community with regards to enforcement with the police department, and trying to get the information out on what we do and what we do not engage in when it comes to immigrant affairs. That in itself concludes the presentation. I just want to thank you guys for giving the opportunity, and definitely welcome engagement from you, as you guys have been engaging with us and giving us your ideas of how our department should move forward with this, and how we should engage with our immigrant and refugee communities. And the chief is well aware of it, and we are definitely making certain with tenacity that we are engaging in the proper way and making certain no one is victimized by what we're doing with regards to their immigrant status. So I will take on any questions if you have any for me.
Thank you for that presentation, Assistant Chief. Colleagues, are there any questions or discussion related to this presentation? I'll first recognize Council Member Chavez.
Thank you, Chair Chuck Tai, and thank you for the presentation. I have a few. I've been reading over the MPD's policy manual. I think one of them talks about that members shall only initiate the actions above when specifically enforcing laws relating to human trafficking and smuggling, where immigration status is an element of the crimes, and that's talking about partly about the separation ordinance. I think my question here is, how would MPD approach instances that begin with human trafficking and smuggling but end with immigration enforcement, particularly taking people as collateral damage? So I guess I would love to hear how MPD would approach those instances in the future.
Thank you, Council Member. Appreciate it. It's a great question. It's a question that's asked by many people. As far as the chief and the chief's guidance that he has given, is that when something gets to the point where there may be a thin line, you're maybe operating in the rightful capacity of engaging in law enforcement, and it may turn a corner, as I believe that's what you're speaking about. And our officers are to disengage, contact a supervisor, and that supervisor runs it up the chain to the chief or the chief's designee on whether or not MPD personnel will continue to engage in any activity. As you've heard from the chief, we have no interest in engaging in activities that concern enforcement of immigration status. So when it does, or if it does turn that corner, then our officers have been notified that they are to engage with their supervisor, and that will be immediately run up the chain of command before any further actions would take place.
Thank you. I appreciate your response. I think another question, and I'm looking through the policy manual. It talks about that nothing in this policy shall prohibit members from assisting federal law enforcement officers in the investigation of criminal activity involving people present in the United States who may also be in violation of federal civil immigration laws in accordance with the City of Minneapolis ordinance. I think I would like to hear examples of that instance, because I think the federal administration would consider any undocumented person as a quote-unquote criminal. They would also consider someone coming to the United States as an undocumented person as violating federal immigration law. So I just want to get more specifics on what that part means in the MPD the policy when it comes to this instance. Like who, what does MPD interpret as a violation of federal civil immigration law? And then in what instances would MPD then assist?
Thank you, Chair and Council Member. If I'm following you correctly, I think the best example I could give that would be most congruent with the policy would be if there were a detainer or warrant issued by, say, a federal entity, and officers happen to, and this is hypothetical, happen to pull someone over and they see on their computer within their car that there is a warrant and it's specific to immigration status, that our officers are not to comply or engage with that activity any further, and then at that point it would cease. If I'm understanding your
Yes,
question.
for sure. So in that instance, MPD could possibly stop someone. There in the record, it shows that they're violating federal immigration law, but nothing else, and then that federal immigration law may be just coming into the country as an undocumented immigrant. MPD would not assist or collaborate with ICE, is what I'm hearing, correct?
Yeah, our piece of it would be it's a violation of our policy. We don't enforce federal laws. We enforce state laws and city ordinances.
Thank you. And then I have two other questions, and then I'll be done. I think in the presentation it talks about the discipline matrix being under revision. Do you know if any of those revisions, when are those revisions going to come back as approved? And then do any of those new revisions have any component when it comes to immigration enforcement or immigration, and any violations on that?
And Chair and Council Member, another great question. Yes, to both. The matrix, along with when it's going to be approved, there's a timeline in December as far as the anticipated approval time. Now that can come before, and transparently speaking, they could ask for an extension as well. My understanding as of this morning is that they're on pace. Dialogue is taking place, and the expectation is that there will be verbiage within addressing the separation ordinance, as well as trying to get that timeline met. And we're anticipating that that timeline will be met as of today.
Cool. And you said December?
December, and I don't remember the exact day, but I know it was sometime in December of this year. Yes.
Cool, thank you. And then the last question I have is when it comes to placards that used to exist or exist currently in MPD marked cars. So it talked about know your rights, particularly for the immigrant community. I believe these used to exist or currently exist, but I'm trying to get a specific answer on this. Do you know how many of these placards, know your rights, I believe they used to exist in MPD squad cars, how many we have currently, because I know there was hundreds before. So I guess my question is, do they still exist? How many do we have? Can we get that information?
Yeah, and Chair and Council Member, I will have to get back to you on all three of those questions. As far as how many we have, I don't know the exact number as far as them being available in the squad cars. I believe so, but I will definitely check for you and get that back to you.
Thank you. So Chair Chugta, if we can get that for administrative follow-up, that would be great.
Clerks, did we catch that? Know your rights placards in MPD vehicles, whether that's something that still exists, how many, and just some further follow-up information around those. Wonderful. All right. Thank you. Next, I will recognize Councilmember Chowdhury.
Thank you, Chair Chugtai. Thank you for presenting AC
Councilmember, if we just want to move your mic so we can pick up what you're saying.
How's that? That's
Perfect.
good? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming to committee, and also thank you, Chair and members of the committee, for letting us come in and ask some questions. In the presentation that you gave, you cited documentation ambiguity. Could you speak a little bit more to that? Is that about the section within the separation ordinance where it says all such use of city public safety personnel under the separation ordinance shall be documented, including any applicable Department of Homeland Security mission statement?
And I'm going to take a second to read this real quick, please.
Okay.
And the way I understand it, Chair and Council Member, is by understanding who would be accountable and responsible when those actions are taken. I looked more so internally. The federal government does not have a play or say in our police department as far as these specific items, as far as what we do with immigration. That's something that's done by the police chief himself. However, making certain as I read it that when initiating enforcement or initiating any contact or dialogue, that the documentation is documented by the appropriate person internally, and that person is being held accountable, as I spoke kind of earlier, if I'm understanding it correctly, that a supervisor, if we kind of turned that corner into another area, a supervisor would be notified, and then it would go all the way up through the chief or the chief's designee. The way I look at it is more being who's going to be held accountable and making sure that verbiage is documented and our officers are trained on it and well aware of it, all the way up through our executive leadership.
Okay, just to follow up on that, I'll just kind of share what the section itself says. All such city public personnel under 19.30 shall be documented, including any applicable Department of Homeland Security mission statement and any operational guidelines, the reason for dispatch of personnel, the name of the Homeland Security agent in charge, and the name of the name of the officer authorizing the use of city personnel. And this might be for the city attorney. The way that I'm reading this shall be documented is any case where city personnel, public safety personnel, is authorized for a Department of Homeland Security mission. Is that correct?
Chair Chugtai and council member, what this is saying is that when under 19.30A3 or 4, which are two exceptions where, let's see, 3 would be where the police would be questioning, arresting, or detaining somebody when immigration status is an element of the crime, and then 4 would be police assisting law enforcement officers in the investigation of criminal activity involving individuals present in the U.S. who may also be in violation of federal civil immigration law. So there's some other criminal investigation, and then when that occurs, that use has to be documented. And the ordinance is, I will add this to my list of why you should not use passive voice. The ordinance just says it shall be documented. It doesn't say who must do the documentation in those circumstances.
Mm-hmm. And the way that I read it, in the way that it says the name of the authorizing officer of the use of city personnel indicates clearly, like, to me, that it should be a city actor, right, to document it. I don't know if that's the police chief or someone else. And kind of looking at a present example, on June 3rd at Lake and Bloomington, ICE was present, and there was a federal immigration raid, and that falls under that section 4. And then it would initiate that shall be documented piece. Do you know if any information has been documented specifically around like the mission statement and the operation guidelines and the authorizing officer for the use of city personnel going out to the scene?
That question is for me, Counselor?
Yes.
Yeah. Chair and council member, that specific matter out there, I am not privy to all the information to that matter. It would be very difficult for me to speak without, speculating. However, I can only say what I understand it to be. I think, although not as eloquently, I think we're kind of saying the same thing from the attorney's office as well. However, I look at it more so of the documentation of compliance with the policy. However, I'm not sure that I can fully answer your question without
Let me just take a step
guessing.
back, and maybe it's less for you, AC Gators, and perhaps the city attorney can jump in, or whoever has the answer. I think for me, clearly, the actions that took place on June 3rd at Lake and Bloomington, where city personnel, MPD, was authorized to show up on the scene where ICE was present, basically brings forward this part of the ordinance of there shall be documentation of how this occurred, who was the authorizing officer, the agent in charge, the reason for dispatch, and the question, I guess, is, has there been documentation done by the city of Minneapolis on this case?
Council, Vice President, council member, I can't answer your question about whether or not there's been documentation, but I guess I would say I would need more information to determine whether documentation is required under the ordinance. The ordinance does not require documentation anytime MPD is interacting with ICE. What that provision says is nothing shall prohibit public safety personnel from assisting federal law enforcement in the investigation of criminal activity involving individuals present in the United States who may also be in violation of federal civil immigration law. So that would only be triggered if that investigation that the Lake Street matter was based on involved people who also were in violation of federal civil immigration law. So if that's the case, then it would be triggered, but the fact that ICE is out there alone is not enough to trigger that.
Okay, I think I would request to the chair if that could be asked for administrative follow-up, is did this case specifically trigger the section A4, and if there has been documentation done. And also, I would love to get some more clarity on what section 4 means itself, because the language that says involving individuals present in the United States who may be in violation, it's not. It sounds like how definitive of an answer of if someone's in violation of civil immigration law or not, I don't know. That feels unclear as how we would know about it. All we know is that there were agents there that do conduct immigration enforcement, and then we showed up onto the scene in assistance of the enforcement that was happening there. So clarity there would be really helpful.
Just want to confirm that clerks caught that, and then when the council member refers to section 4, it's chapter 19.30A4. Great. All right. And then I will finally recognize Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know this legislative directive is specifically addressing the separation ordinance and compliance with that, and so I think some of the follow-up questions that Councilmember Chowdhury raised and Councilmember Chavez raised will be great, but I did want to just take this opportunity to ask you a couple questions about June 3rd as well, just given that there's so much community interest in what happened that day, and I'm specifically concerned with some allegations that MPD was covering their badges and their names that day, as well as a video that circulated of an officer pushing a protester. So I'm just wondering if you could give me an update on any investigation or disciplinary action that has been taken. I know that we have a really great Office of Police Conduct Review form that's now been updated on the website so that folks can actually make a complaint if they witness police misconduct, but you can't do that if you don't know the officer's name, because that is a requirement of that form, as far as I understand. So just an update on where those two aspects of June 3rd are at would be really helpful.
Chair and council member, unfortunately, I'm unable to give you an update. As I kind of explained before, I am not privy to what's being looked at in that course, especially if it goes to OPCR as well. I do make it a point to need to know when I need to know and keep my hands off of things that I should be keeping my hands off of. So as far as like sequence of events, body-worn camera, things of that nature that may have been reviewed, I am not privy to and unable to answer, unfortunately, that question at this time.
Okay, well, thank you, AC Gators, for your presentation. I will ask that we have a follow-up memo on that piece as well, because I know that there is someone who knows, whether it's the Civil Rights Director or the Chief, and I just have to state that it's not your fault, but I am a little disappointed that the Chief isn't here, just given how much interest there is from community members about this very topic and keeping our immigrants safe. So I did want to say that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, council member.
Thank you. Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Chair Chuck Tai, and thank you, AC Gators. I have a question on slide number 9. I think point 2 talks about training gaps. The department continues to refine messaging to ensure officers understand that perceived undocumented status alone does not constitute reasonable suspicion or probable cause for criminal investigation. Can you dive deeper into this barrier to compliance component? I think I'm a little concerned that this is being identified as a barrier to compliance when it comes to just the perception of being an undocumented immigrant in this country, and how our officers, I guess, MPD is identifying that as a barrier to compliance. I guess I want to understand how that came up on, I guess, why would someone's status ever constitute someone's suspicion or probable cause for criminal investigation?
If I'm understanding you, Chair and council member, are you speaking in if there's an engagement with someone and at some point the immigration status would come up?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, not that. I'm just wondering how that was identified as a barrier to compliance. That point number 2, the training gap component that says the department continues to refine messaging to ensure officers understand that perceived undocumented status alone does not constitute reasonable suspicion or probable cause for criminal investigation. I guess my question is, why has that been a barrier to compliance? I'm concerned that that is even a thought, I guess.
Yeah, and Chair and council member, what you have in law enforcement, when enforcement activities take place, you typically are looking for, not always, not limited to just this, but you're typically looking for reasonable suspicion to engage with an individual or probable cause as well. And that probable cause, is what officers use as a foundation for arrest in violation of a crime. So what we want to make certain with our officers is that they know, as they know the foundation is either reasonable suspicion that you're looking for or probable cause. We want them to understand that in no circumstance does this in and of itself or by itself indicate reasonable suspicion or probable cause to further, continue in that criminal process by one's immigration status. It is not to be used for reasonable suspicion, is not to be used for probable cause to make an arrest. Thus, you kind of cancel out the event of an officer saying that, I'm going to arrest a person or I pulled a vehicle over for reasonable suspicion of, and that officer, if it comes through his or her mind that, this is why I did it because of immigration status, that should be a key indicator that, you're done here, stop. This policy clearly indicates, and the training clearly indicates, that this is in and of itself cannot be used as reasonable suspicion or probable cause to move forward.
For sure. And I understand that that's like MPD leadership's intent and goal, which I support, and I think that's great. I think my only concern was that it's been mentioned on the barrier to compliance, and my concern is that does that mean we have many officers in MPD that are struggling with that component, and then what are we doing to make sure that maybe our training improves, that we hone in on that a lot more, because I think it is a little bit concerning to me that folks in the department might think that someone's perceived undocumented status could, so that's just my point. I think I agree with you on that, like, that should not be the case, but I guess I'm just concerned that it's noted on the barrier to compliance, because I just wouldn't expect that, so, yeah.
And Chair and Council Member, if I could just say, like, an older officer who's been in our culture and our police department since this policy came into play, they're well aware of the MPD's policy, and that's one piece that I will say with conviction that our officers have done fairly well over the years when they know that we don't engage with immigration status, and it's been that way for some time. However, if I were a new officer on the department and it's something new to me, it's a reminder, and may be or may not be, depends on the lens in which you view it, but it may or may not be a barrier to them. However, they will quickly learn through our training unit and through our policies as they are instituted and given to them that this is not the way that the Minneapolis Police Department nor Chief O'Hara expects our officers to conduct themselves.
Thank you. And then the last question I'll ask, and it'll be administrative follow-up because I don't expect you to answer it here today, is how many times has the city violated the city separation ordinance? And that would be beyond just the police department. So I'm asking for administrative follow-up because it could be not just MPD, we have other city personnel. And then, so that's the first question. How many times have we as a city broken the city separation ordinance? I think I really want to have a better understanding of that component. And then I forgot my last question, so I'll leave it at that.
And Chair and Council Member, I think I can answer for MPDs because we've asked that question. And I've been told that no violations have been confirmed in the last 10 years. And I believe that since the ordinance took place, but I cannot obviously speak for the city itself.
And I remember the last question. It's how many times has Immigration Customs Enforcement or Homeland Security reached out for assistance to the city? And that'll be it. I'm done. Thank you.
And Chair, I can't answer that for the police department on how many times they've conversed with others on the agency. I don't know if that would be documented each time everywhere. But thank you very much.
Thank you. And that's things we got to look at in the city separation ordinance, because I think tracking, accountability, transparency, reporting is important. So that's stuff we're looking at. So thank you.
Councilmember, on your first question for administrative follow-up in this set, which was how many times, if I'm remembering correctly, I think it was how many times has the city been found to violate or not be in compliance with the city's separation policy. Would you consider just amending that slightly to include how many times have we ever investigated internally potential violations of the policy?
I think both, yes.
Great, thank you. Clerks, did we catch those? Wonderful. Now, just before we wrap up here, I don't see anyone else in queue, but feel free to jump in if you have any further questions. In barriers to compliance, right, the slide that you have up, the examples aside from training gaps, so we'll start with documentation ambiguity. You noted in your presentation, and it came up in discussion here today too, where how you have come to learn that this is a barrier to compliance, that documentation ambiguity and who's responsible. is something that you've run into, and so you have come to identify it as a barrier to compliance. External misunderstandings, again, is you provided an example, I believe, of outside agencies making requests and conflicting that conflict with the city's separation policy. How can you help shed some light into or provide some reassurance that the way you came to identify training gaps isn't because you had officers that were using perceived documentation status as the basis of identifying probable cause, or I can't remember the second term that you used, but yeah.
Chair, I don't remember the second term that I used. However, some of these barriers are in anticipation of. So some of these thoughts are thought out of things that could actually occur that maybe we have not thought about. And these things we brainstorm in our training unit as well. They do a great job. What if something, over and over again, and this is, I'm not saying that as an absolute, this is what it is, but however, we do think about things that could occur that we may not have verbiage in policy or in a matrix, and those are things that we will continue to engage in dialogue internally and taking suggestions externally as well, and of course from our legislators, all of you as well, on ways to maybe better the way we're operating within the police department.
Wonderful, thank you. Seeing no further questions or discussion, I will direct the clerk to receive and file that report. Thank you for coming in and for that presentation. With that, we have concluded all business to come before the committee today, and if there are no objections, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.